Jai Hind everyone. It's matter of great honor and privilege for Center for Joint Warfare Studies, CENJOWS, to welcome General Dushyant, DG Claus, who will be speaking to us on a very important subject which draws the attention of the entire Defense Forces fraternity. And that subject is grey zone warfare. Why it is important? Because there is a lot of ambiguity about this subject, what it constitutes, what all issues are there where we need to do the capability development, and how do we proceed with issues involved in the grey zone warfare. Uh, if my memory goes right, out of all the Indian authors and professionals who have deliberated on this subject, Jal Dushyant is the lead one. He has also written a book on grey zone warfare, which encompasses a lot of issues to learn for all of us. Uh, and I'm sure in the course of deliberations, you will have certain questions in your mind, and then we can seek guidance and inputs on those issues as well. So before I invite him to commence the talk, I shall request Dr. Urupi Bora to introduce the speaker.
Lt Gen Dushyant Singh, PVSM, AVSM, retired, was commissioned into the 9th Battalion of the Maratha Light Infantry Regiment in December 1981. He is an alumnus of NBC, DSSC, CDM, and Naval Postgraduate School, California, USA. He has attended the Regional Defense Counterterrorism Program with specialization in terrorist operations and financing in US. He has served in varied terrains and theater of operations in India and in the UN as military observer. He has been an instructor of human resource development in College of Defense Management, Secunderabad. The general officer has commanded an infantry battalion, brigade, and a division in Jammu and Kashmir. He also holds the distinction of having served twice in the elite National Security Guards as the Deputy Inspector General Operations and Inspector General Operations. The general officer has also held the appointment of Brigadier General Staff of a corps in the East and Chief of Staff, Eastern Command. The general officer commanded a corps and thereafter headed the Army War College. For his distinguished service, the general officer has been awarded Ati Vishist Seva Medal and Param Vishist Seva Medal. Besides contributing regularly in various defense journals and newspapers, he has also written chapters in 3 books. His book on grey zone warfare, Way Ahead for India, was recently published and is quite popular in the strategic community. In addition, he has chapters in many other books and journals on strategic affairs. He was the vice chairman of Strive India think tank and Professor Emeritus Rashtriya Raksha University, an institution of national importance, working under the overall supervision of Ministry of Home Affairs. He is currently the Director General for the Center for Land Warfare Studies.
First of all, a very good morning to all of you, those who are present here and those online. At the outset, I must thank the Director General of Center for Joint Warfare Studies, Major General Ashok, for having invited me to give a talk on this very important subject, but highly misunderstood at the same time. Because more often than not, by the word grey zone, we tend to have different perceptions without actually going into detail as to what exactly comprises grey zone. So I'll commence my presentation by the fact that there are shades of grey. There's nothing called one single band of grey zone. There are shades of grey. And by that, what I mean is that there could be concentration of a particular form of a warfare within this grey zone. So there may be, say, for example, a high level of information war going on. That there could be a high level of cyber war which is going on. So there are shades, and these shades in itself combine to make this entire spectrum of grey zone warfare. And another fact which has now started emerging, especially after the Syrian war, the Russia-Ukraine war, and the ongoing Israel-Hamas war, where you find that grey zone is extending now into the war itself. That means once the war becomes a full-scale war, full-spectrum war, there also you will find the elements of grey zone are working. So it's become all pervasive. that is the meaning which I want to highlight by this, that it is becoming capricious. It is becoming more and more intense. But is it a new thing? Or is it just simply uh, old wine in a new bottle? I tend to go with the second thought, that it is a old wine in a newly packaged uh, container or a bottle. The difference is that its intensity has increased. And the reason for increase of that intensity is the emerging niche technologies. That is providing that key difference to what was happening earlier. You earlier had propaganda war, you earlier had psychological war, you earlier had legal wars taking place, cartographic wars taking place. But it is a technology which is making it more and more non-attributable, right? People are getting away with it and saying that, okay, we are not responsible. We have nothing to do. So this deniability and non-attributability is something which is luring people to indulge more and more in grey zone war. And the third aspect because of this is that the cost of wars which were going high, very high. Conventional war, the costs have been phenomenal. I'll quote some figures as we go along. Those are now in some way inhibiting nations or actors, whether non-state actors or state actors, from undertaking a full spectrum war. Okay, so that is a major difference with that. You all must have heard about this incident called Mumbai Goes Dark. This happened surprisingly just 3 months after the Galwan. So you see the connect. Galwan happened, and then suddenly there was an attack on the entire electrical grid of Mumbai. Mumbai pays 500 crores surcharge per year to ensure that it has a hassle-free, non-stop electricity supply. It has 4 islands which are part of this grid. One or the other island will always be functioning. It was established in 1981, and 1981 till last year, there had been about 37 disruptions. It was only the 2020 October disruption which actually led to all the 4 grids failing. And people attribute this to an attack by a Red Eco Brigade, which was supposedly a China-sponsored hacking agency, which intervened into the electronic exchange of these grids and brought them down. It was an old system. Possibly it was that is why easier to breach it. Now, of course, I believe necessary preventive measures have been taken to prevent such a thing from happening again. But the point I'm saying is, even on this, a gray zone was started. The activity itself was gray zone, but how the gray zone got perpetuated further was by the fact that the state government and the central government were not on the same page. The central government took it as an affront that somebody could, intervene into such a strong system. So the central government said it was a technical snag and nothing to do with any cyber attack, etc. Power Minister Mr. R.K. Singh, he went on record to claim this kind of a statement. At the same time, the Maharashtra government said no, it was a cyber attack based on their intelligence agencies, what they were able to gather out of this. And this was also substantiated by the external agencies like the US, etc. So what are you seeing? You are seeing your fault lines being accentuated. There was a gray zone attack, but that was being further accentuated by creating internal differences. That is the power of gray zone now. And all this is happening because of the technological interference, which can now be so easily done. World was better off, I suppose, when they were not so interconnected. You could deal with your problem in an isolated manner. That's one way to look at it. Let's go further. The second attack was a technology demonstrator. This is something which you all must note that in February of 2020, this was before the Galwan attack, and later on in June 20, India's all the ports, airports, 2 seaports. India's 10 power infrastructures and 2 seaports they were hacked. In fact, in February 2020, 40,000 plus hacking attacks were undertaken by non-state groups perpetually operating from China. This is the kind of attacks which we are seeing in a concentrated manner. What was claimed as part of this attack was that we are telling you, we are demonstrating to you that we have this capability to stop your entire grid. And later on in October 20, they demonstrated it by attacking our Mumbai grid. So this is the way they have tried to threaten us. This is a threatening activity. Chinese have done a threatening activity. Look, this is my capability. If you take panga with me, I'm going to, give you in kind. Similarly, there are reports now that they also are developing capabilities for our railway infrastructure interference, basically traffic management systems. So anything like this which will create a major loss to us, we need to be extra prepared for that. Our air traffic control systems are prone to this kind of interference. I'll give you a real life example. This happened. I was the chief of staff of Eastern Command. In a command, those in the army, they would understand what is the status of a chief of staff. So he was basically the number 2 man. Our army commander was flying from place A to place B. I will not quote the exact location in a helicopter. But during this flight of his, suddenly his RT was jammed, and there was a communication taking place he couldn't understand in a different language. Again, a technology demonstrator that we can interfere with your air communications as well. So what I'm trying to highlight here is that we are now in a living danger of such attacks taking place all around us. And as we go, okay, moving further, why gray zone is being adopted? For that, we have to understand the geopolitical landscape. So there are certain constants in geopolitical landscape today. In the today's context, I'm not talking about it for a historical context, but in today's context, what is happening is conflicts and peace efforts are going on simultaneously. In fact, today, world is more dangerous if I were to look at it from the various conflicts which are taking place all across. Whether we start from the west to the east, that is from Philippines, Taiwan, you come down to South China Sea, the other activities of the Chinese. Then you have activities which are in the Middle East, which all of you are aware of, Israel and Syria. And then in Africa, you have a number of these conflicts taking place. But at the same time, there are efforts on to bring in peace. So this is a constant. So if this is the constant, you'll find the gray zone getting concentrated in these areas. Okay, so most of the gray zone activities you'll find related to these hotspots which are there in the world. Why these conflicts are taking place? Self-explanatory. They are based on the national interest. They are based on resources war. Based on geographical location, boundary issues, etc. They are based on demographic factors. That is, there is a inherent inimical differences between the population of the two countries. Global commons is another area which is a cause of conflict. And by this, I mean, we are looking at climate, etc. You'll find conflict over climate as well. A group of block of nations feel that India is not doing enough. A block of nations would feel that the West is not doing enough. People calculate all these factors in as per their convenience. Data is projected as per convenience. India will project that America is using 25% of the energy, right? And we are using per capita only very minimal energy, whereas the per capita energy usage of America is very high. Now you can look at it from either way. Very simple example. I was in the US when I was doing that program which you referred to. There was a war on eating food consumption. the Americans were saying that India and China consume the largest quantum of food in the world. Very simple. They were correct. They quoted the figures. The reply for them from India and China went that our per capita consumption is the least in the world. Just because our population is more, it doesn't mean that we are consuming more. And their per capita consumption of food was almost 5,000 calories, 4,000 some odd calories. What is our consumption? It was India has become a little better, you know. Our consumption was coming to around 2,800 and 900, and the Chinese are around 3,500. So, and what I'm saying is there is a lot of scope in this conflict and peace dimension. What is the environment which we are looking at? The environment which we are looking at is highly vulnerable, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. No discussion on this. It is very difficult to predict what things will happen in the future, and what are the tools which are being used by people in the international relations are alliances, partnerships, global forums. I'm talking of multiple forums, regional forums, balancing, and if everything else fails, they are doing war oblique non-contact war oblique hybrid war oblique gray zone. So this is the introduction to the fact that how gray zone war have evolved over a period of time. Why have they evolved? That I will cover in these three major heads. First of all, I will try to decipher the war and warfare and where does hybrid and gray zone war fits in. Why? Because there is a lot of confusion on understanding war. For example, there is no definition of war as yet. No accepted definition. You will find the definition in Webster, etc. But accepted definition, even the United Nations doesn't have. I'll quote that. I'll cover that later. Why should India be prepared for such a war? And is India doing something to face these threats? And what could be the outline of our future strategy? So this, in nutshell, would be my way ahead as far as my future goes. So coming to drivers of conflict, we just spoke about that today the world is becoming hot and hot. Key hotspots are increasing by the day. If you look at the diagram in the center, it is I have mentioned the drivers. Now, not all drivers may be active in any conflict. You know, certain drivers will be active in a certain conflict. So, national interest goes without saying is the first and the major reason for conflicts to occur. Then, cost of wars. Why I have written cost of wars is to basically bring in the fact that what kind of war will be waged, right? If a nation cannot afford the cost of war, the nature of war will be different. Similarly, technology, which I have already highlighted, people are saying revolution in technology. I say tsunami in technology. It is actually technology is getting outdated within months, within I think years. 1 year down the line, you find 5G has just come and people are already talking about 6G. And India is trying to catch up. You know, we're trying to still decide as to who will take the lead in 6G. It was good that we took a lead in the 5G, and today we are independent of the Chinese companies and the other companies as far as 5G is concerned. So the technology tsunami is in front of us, and if we go along with it, fine. Otherwise, we will be swept away. Then rise of religious terrorism. To my belief, now it is getting little toned down. There is a theory on this which I always cover. A lot of people dissent with that theory, and that theory is called 40-year cycle of terror. Last 200 years, you find that the ideologies are driving terrorism, and it started initially with anarchy, which was the revolution eras, Russian Revolution, French Revolution, etc. Then it switched over to nationalism, which was the colonial era, where people started revolting against the colonial rulers of their countries. And then the third cycle was communism, where once they got independence, these countries, there was inequality in their growth. So you found a lot of communist driven terrorist movements rising up right from the South American continent to the east, Malaya, etc. So you'll find that was the third wave that lasted for the least amount of time, I think around 35, 40 years. It's not to say that the older ones are not carrying on, but the bulk of them disappeared. Only few odd here and there, like we have still communism reflecting in our Naxal belt, but that's also reducing over a period of time. And the last, the current one is the religious terrorism, which is defined that 40-year. It has just crossed the 45th year mark. If I were to take 1979 as the benchmark, see what happened was, it was for the first time that a kind of a radical movement was successful, which was the Iranian Revolution. They came and they took power, and that became the kind of motivation for others to start taking to terrorism, which was driven by religious motivation. So from then on, you would find that 80s we had the Russians being opposed by the Azam group, which in those days was called Mujahid movement, and then thereafter when the Americans came, Taliban and others, again they were all motivated by religious factors. Against India, you will find same thing happening in the JNK sector. So ideologies also play an important role. Why do they play an important role? It's because they bundle everything into it. Ideology is the problem, and ideology is also the way, and ideology is also the solution. Problem is created, you are not following the ideology. Solution is, if you follow the ideology, you will get the solution. So it's a single window motivation for anyone, and therefore ideologies are always in a terrorist movement, and therefore they become part of a greyzone war by the way of using as proxies. So you can always say what what Pakistan is doing to India. No, we are not responsible. It's an independent movement. It's a movement for independence, etc. They are freedom fighters. So Pakistan is doing nothing about it. So that deniability factor puts this kind of a proxy terrorism into grey zone. Then you have the rise of supranational, rise of expansionist China. China has also been fomenting a lot of conflicts all over without being overtly seen as the initiator of conflict, either through its proxies or by itself. Whether you take South China Sea or whether you take in the Middle East, where it is having a role in supporting Iran, so Iran is doing something. So the rise of China has also led to a lot of conflicts in the world today, which are in the grey zone category. We will cover what is grey zone subsequently. Failure of UN. I think this goes without saying. The UN has become more and more ineffective, and therefore it is not able to control the conflicts which are arising all across the world. And last point is about super state actors. Now, for lack of time, I will not be indulging in a two-way process, but super state actors, by that, what I mean is that now there are independent private entities which have the influence to create conflict and act in the grey zone. I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say you talk about the George Soros Foundation or Ford Foundation. Now they are active across the globe. So they can fund movements, they can fund some kind of people's revolution through their NGOs which are there all over. Now that is the kind of influence. They go across boundaries of nations where nations are not even involved, and they can do so against their own country as well. So that kind of super state actors, I'll give you a more simple and easier example to make you understand. Today, Bill Gates is heading the Microsoft window. Nice person, possibly very balanced. Tomorrow, suppose, after Bill Gates goes, somebody else takes over Microsoft Windows, and he decides in his one of the Windows packages or one of his apps, he decides to inject something which will affect across the globe. Doesn't he become a grey zone warfare perpetuator? So such like things can happen. Google can do it, Facebook can do it. So there is a tremendous potential now of super state actors trying to create this kind of a grey zone war. What are the preferred choices for war? Both non-kinetic, kinetic. Why people are preferring non-kinetic over kinetic? Cost. And here quote some costs which are written on the left. 600 billion was the damage till last year to Ukraine. 900 million dollars Russia was spending when the active war was going on per day. Cost of wars for the US in the Middle East and Asia was 6.4 trillion. These are all authenticated figures. If you read my book, you'll find the sources also for these. Leading to 8 lakh loss of lives, including 3,35,000 civilians. It's no joke. India, that should be 1994. By mistake, it's 994. Till date, 67,000 lives have been lost in a grey zone kind of a war, of which 42,000 lives are from J&K. That's the kind of impact which the grey zone spectrum is giving to the world as such. It's slow death. Wars you fight a Kargil war, we suffer losses, we have 15 days war, 1 month war, we had lost 500 lives. We have, that's not a thing to be looked over. But look at this. They are killing you slowly and we don't realize it. It's only when somebody aggregates this figure that you realize, the kind of damage which you are suffering. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is good for stating your positions, but primacy of interests will remain in the future as the prime driver of geopolitical activities and international relations, including conflicts. With that, I come to one more figure just to quote you. This is a snapshot of a talk given by Brian Toon TED Talks, in which he says if India were to fight 15 days war with Pakistan, we would end up spending 2.5 lakh crores. It will lead to a fiscal deficit in the ensuing year of 50%, which would be amounting to about 8 lakh crores for likely recouping, subsequent arms race which might start after this particular conflict, and replenishment of lives. By replenishment of lives, I mean whatever losses we have suffered in terms of human lives, we'll have to replace them. We'll have to get them back into our armies, because war over doesn't mean that we will scale down the war. Potential for conflict would still remain. And if you were to add the limited nuclear war into it, we talk of tactical nuclear, etc. And then India's responsive massive retaliation, the globe may suffer a famine. How far, on what basis he has said this? He's supposed to be a very well-known person. So I accept that even if it is 50% true, look at the damages which we are likely to suffer of war. And that is one of the major motivators why people now are continuing to stick to the grey zone activities. Okay, coming down to now my issue of demystifying the grey zone. Hybrid, grey, NDO, multi-domain operation, which we not even, I didn't even tell in my introduction, but here I will lay out the relationship of that. So coming down to war as such, if you look at war can be seen, these are various ways to see the war. War can be seen in terms of actors and in terms of forms of warfare or activities which are there. So if you look at the activity, it starts from peace to full-fledged war. In between, you will find a series of activities which actors take. It could be in terms of diplomacy, free market, information operation, cyber operation, assassination, riots, protests, revolutions, proxy war, peacemaking, and violence. Now, these will go side by side with wars. So, from a peaceful environment to a full-fledged war environment, in between are these activities which form the how should I say, the pillars of grey zone warfare. And that is why my colors are also a little increasing in the shade. Finally it becomes black. Now, who are the actors? Actors start from the civilians and go up to military personnel. In between, you will find private state-owned enterprises. You will find civilian government entities. You will find paramilitary, we call it Central Police Armed Forces, and then finally military. The other way to look at gray zone is through the spectrum of warfare. What do we call as full spectrum warfare? Full spectrum warfare is between the peace and war zone. What are the activities? You can have economic war, you can have diplomatic war, you can have political war, legal war, information war, cyber war, hybrid war, proxy war. Situation has become hybrid with elements of gray present across the entire spectrum of war. Hybrid, if you want to understand hybrid simply means more than two forms of war. That's all. In which contact element has to be there. In gray zone, that contact element may or may not have. So Russia's war on Ukraine was a hybrid war. It started off with a gray zone activity, and finally they injected the conventional element into it when their special forces, I'm talking of up to 2022, not after 2022, when they inducted their special forces into the eastern Ukraine. So they were fighting now with the rebels along with the Russian forces. Then it became hybrid. So more forms of war have got added, but the content of contact war or troops, regular troops, must be there normally in a hybrid war. Why we call Pakistan more as a proxy war is that till date, although now there are incidents coming that possibly the special forces also of the Pakistan Army SSG get involved in some few raids across what we call as border action teams, etc. But by and large, they are trying to do just a proxy war which remains in the gray zone. So with this brief overall spectrum of war, let me now start coming to specific wars. How do you define wars? Now, Webster defines war as a state of open and a declared conflict, hostile armed conflict between states or nations. So, what are the elements of a war? It should be declared, and it should be an armed conflict. Now, US has not declared any war after 1945. So can you term it as war as per Webster? You can't. So they not declared war against Iraq. On paper, they have not declared. They may tell, but they have not declared it. Then, how does the UN look at it? The UN says that aggression is the use of force by state against the territorial integrity or political independence of another state, or in any other manner inconsistent with the Charter of the United Nations as set out in this definition. United Nations prohibits use of force. So what it implies is that if your territorial integrity or political independence is being threatened, that is called sovereignty or suzerainty, depending on what kind of a nation it is, you can go for war. So as of now, there are other definitions also where they say more than X number of casualties in a this much times in a particular time span would be termed as a war. A number of forces involved in a conflict would be viewed as war. But nothing final has come about. These two, I thought, one is an academic definition, the other one is what the UN Charter says about war or nearing to a war. They are basically telling about aggression. So if this be the ambiguity, obviously people will be utilizing this ambiguity for furthering their aim. So terms. Next one. Why I have used this? Just to tell you all that it's a Western construct. Whenever they find that there is some difference from a existing pattern, they would evolve a term. So initially, till Second World War, people fought as open conflicts, war, two armies fighting against each other. Suddenly, an era of they suddenly after 1945, they found that guerrilla warfare started. Che Guevara and all these guys, you know. So they realized that there is something more to war. So they introduced the term unconventional, which got later on little modified to low intensity conflict or guerrilla warfare. I'll cover the definition of unconventional war in my next view file. But simply to say, at that point in time, it meant that anything which is not conventional, anything which is not conventional is unconventional. It was black and white, synonym and antonym. That is how this particular term got evolved. Then we came up with 3GW, third generation warfare. Why? Because importance of speed, stealth, and surprise started gaining prominence. We're talking of air-land battles, etc. So they said, okay, it is the third generation warfare. Then came the fourth generation warfare. That when we are doing all this, there is this non-state actors which have started getting inside, Al Qaeda and these kind of people. So we are now fighting a non-state actor as though it's a state. So they said, okay, this is fourth generation warfare. From 3GW, they've gone to fourth GW. Then you had the fifth generation warfare, where networks started getting prominence. So since the networks became a defining factor and long range vectors started getting prominence, it was termed as fifth generation warfare. And now what we are seeing is sixth generation warfare, where people are manipulating the time and space loop through technologies which are speeding up your warfare. And here, basically, the emerging new technologies, force multipliers, all these factors which started coming in, resulted in intensity of warfare increasing and the nature of warfare increasing. And now people are talking of seventh generation warfare, where they are introducing the automated systems, unmanned systems. Recently, you had a match between a manned F-16 and a unmanned F-16 in the US, and you found that the unmanned F-16 won against the manned F-16. Maybe it is true in a experimental condition, in a given setting, but is it going to be true in a real war setting? That is yet to be tested. And that is also one of the reasons why America always keeps indulging in some kind of conflict, basically to also validate their weapon systems. That's a different story altogether. And then you started coining the term called hybrid warfare. It took stage from the Russia-Ukraine war. I mean, it started gaining confidence, gaining prominence from the start of the Russia-Ukraine war of 2014, and thereafter people started talking of hybrid warfare, where both gray zone kind of an activity, that is unconventional activities, and conventional activities were in a mixed manner. There are various forms of hybrid warfare. I will just mention their name: regional hybridism, hybrid balancing, and restricted hybrid. Uh, Essentially, regional hybridism is where they were limiting it to a tactical. The Israelis, when they fight war against Hamas or Palestine, they do not want it to escalate to a particular level. So it is only seen in these areas, in Israel and Hamas. So they have classified it as such, but don't read too much into it. From a simple point of view, hybrid war simply means having more than one form of warfare would be termed as hybrid war. What is gray zone warfare? In gray zone warfare, one of the defining factors, still I would say the Russia-Ukraine war was that non-inclusion of contact. But unfortunately, I think it is now breaking that barrier. So we may have to come up with a little more nuanced definition. Till my last year's research, I had felt that it was broken in February 22 but by that time I had already finished my book, so I did not elaborate much on it. But in my presentation, I now start covering that aspect. And finally, is the unrestricted warfare of China and the three warfare strategy. Now, unrestricted warfare of China has no boundaries. It is like, simply if I were to put it in a simple word, it is everything is fair in heaven. So that is the unrestricted warfare. They have included all the tools available, all the forms of warfare available, to be practiced to gain your political objective or strategic objective. Free warfare is a subset of that, of the three things: public opinion, legal, and uh, social media, etc. So, psychological. So, free warfare is a very small subset of the unrestricted warfare. Unrestricted warfare covers everything and anything which is possible, which you can do to get the enemy to listen to you. Finally, some quick definition, two, three of them. Unconventional wars, it's a US term. It essentially evolved when military support was being given to foreign insurgencies when they were intervening in Latin America, etc. So that is the time it started coming into the fore. Unconventional warfare is a general term for military and quasi-military operations that are not conventional. It's a simple, if I were to give you simple explanation, antonym and synonym, conventional, unconventional. The goal of unconventional warfare was always to coerce, disrupt, or overthrow a government or occupy by operating with an underground auxiliary or guerrilla force. Very simple definition, not difficult to understand because other forms had still not emerged. Then you have the hybrid warfare. I have not covered the 3GW, 5GW because they were all in some way formed part of the conventional warfare. How to make the conventional warfare more effective. But when you're talking of hybrid war, I have already said it came into prominence by around 2014. Again, it was evolved by although people say that Gerasimov doctrine was the concept of Gerasimov, who was the chief of joint staff of Russia, but actually this term was coined by an American. The chief of joint staff of Russia was only saying that in the color revolution, all of you are aware, color revolution took place in the Arab Spring, that US used these tactics, and therefore we must now be careful that it might apply the same tactics against us. Now this got somehow misinterpreted as though Gerasimov has now said that there will be a hybrid form of warfare. That's on the side clarification, which just for your information. Otherwise, from a definition point of view, it is a way of achieving political objectives by any blend of kinetic and non-kinetic tools. So, certain amount of kinetic tools have to be there in a hybrid warfare, while remaining below the threshold of a direct and a large-scale military operation. So, you will find in hybrid warfare military operations taking place, but they are not of a nature which would be large enough to be scaling themselves as. So, like till 2022, it was a classic definition of hybrid warfare. But after 2022, although the Russians did try to retain it as a hybrid warfare by not mentioning it as war, but mentioning it as special military operations. They have attempted to keep it below the large scale threshold for obvious reason. All of you know that if it escalates to a level which is not acceptable to the international community, then you will have possibly the war expanding to NATO, and that is something which even Putin Putin for all his all his posturing, he's also a rational actor, would not like to get involved into a NATO versus Russia war. So that is hybrid warfare. What is gray zone? Every activity that has an impact on achieving strategic advantage vis-a-vis your adversary in a strategic competition or military or non-military conflict and falls short of conventional war beyond the routine activities using positive, negative, or neutral action. Now, this is a definition which I have evolved based on number of definitions. Dani has taken out a definition of gray zone. Hoffman has taken out a definition of gray zone. After having studied all these people, there is one Andrew Kordsman of Australia who has taken out a definition of gray zone war. After studying all these 3, 4, 5 scholars, I tended to agree to the Australian viewpoint. And this definition is a major take from Andrew Kordsman, which states that it includes positive, neutral, and negative activities in multifarious domains. So your domains also get into the picture and may be considered as a gray zone conflict. So what are the defining factors of this is that it's a strategic competition that's given, that's for every war. but it is beyond the routine activities and it uses positive, negative, or neutral actions in multifarious domains, right? And you must read this document of Andrew Cordman. It's there in my book reference. You can Google it, you will find it. He has done a very detailed analysis of this particular gray zone warfare. What is MDO? MDO is the response to it. So if gray zone is a multi-domain activity to bring you down to get your strategic to achieve its strategic objectives, US came up with the doctrine that okay, we will also launch a multi-domain operations to counter these. So MDO, I look at it more as a counter response to gray zone war. So if we understand in this simple term, I think we'll be much more clearer. Although now MDO is also being used as a method of gray zone warfare. After all, they are also doing the same kind of technique, but as a counter. Okay. How did Chanakya view wars? This is my last slide for wars. Why I said old wine in a new bottle. Look at Chanakya, 3rd century BC, 3000 years back. Mantri Yudh, which is diplomatic war. Prakash Yudh, which is open war. Declared, you are fighting, I am fighting, this is the line. This is the क्या बोलते हैं, lineup of the or bat. Let's go. Let's decide. Dharam Yudh was somewhere part of this particular concept. There were rules to fight this war. Then came Kuti, which is concealed war, which included psychological warfare, propaganda, rumor, magic. How do you equate magic to today's environment? Technology. You create magic with technology. You present half truths as truths. You present an activity where it will appear to a person outside that okay, India is collapsing through technological means. I'll give you some examples of that. And lastly, clandestine war, which is simply covert war, assassination, sabotage. So look at this guy's wisdom here. And we are searching here and there for 3rd generation, 4th generation, 5th generation, 7th generation. We are called confused with so many generations. If we adopt this very simple process, you will realize that everything can be clubbed in one of these 4 headings. Okay, so let's go to the why should India be prepared for war, especially gray zone war? I think you'll have to click the whole thing. Let it come. Okay, so you find that there are 2 aspects to why India should be prepared for war. Firstly, is the threat. India is the most threatened nation from potential point of view, if you have to look at it, because on its continental threats on both sides, and the maritime threat is growing slowly as the Chinese navy is gaining more and more powerful. So we have to be now concerned about the threats which are emerging. The second thing is about national interests. Now, there are a number of national interests of a nation, but I have picked up those 3 important ones which always will drive a country into some kind of a conflict. First is unhindered economic growth. If your economic growth is being checked by your adversary, obviously you will take a countermeasure. Well-being of your people, if that is being disturbed, you would end up in some kind of a counter activity. And finally, which is the most dangerous, and that is security against external and internal threats. If you club these 3 big headings, the rest of it leave it to, I mean, there are so many other national interests, but if you start listing them, but these 3 are basically the major ones where you will find that the country getting involved in some kind of a conflict. And this conflict could be conventional, unconventional, hybrid, gray zone, nuclear. Why I am saying that gray zone will be the best form in the future is because of the advantages which it is giving, as we have covered in our previous discussion. So therefore, gray zone becomes the area where we need to focus our capabilities to deal with it. Having said this, what are the toolkits of gray zone? Basically, information, media and social media, cyber, people's war, Arab Spring, Gene Sharp, on farmer protests, Dalit movement protests, CAA protests. These are all methods and means of creating a people's war within a country. I'm not going into the justification of these kinds of activities. I'm simply going by the nature of these activities, that they have a potential to actually upset a country's internal well-being. I'm sure you will understand that by well-being means if people are not able to commute from Delhi to, say, Jammu, and somebody is suffering from a disease and he can't afford an air ticket, that guy will die. The people's well-being is now being threatened. Private military contractor is a very common thing. Surprisingly, I have details, but I'll not cover them here. The largest private military contractors, guess who are having? Is it US? Is it Russia? Is it which country or which region is having the highest number of private military contractors? No, it's West Asia and the Middle East. Highest number of private military contractors are by Saudi Arabia, by UAE, by the other Arab nations who are there. They don't like to fight. They would always outsource their fighting to somebody else. So this is on record. You can check it based on data. Terrorism, lawfare, cartographic fare, covert operation, sabotage, assassinations. What does Israel do? It eliminated all the scientists of nuclear scientists of Iran. Five attempts were made. Their top boss, Fakirzadeh, was also eliminated through a remotely controlled machine gun. Sitting in Israel, he was killed while he was going to his resort. Then we have limited or open war can also be now. I have added this basically after the Russia-Ukraine. I find that people will now use this terms like special military operations, etc., to extend this gray zone spectrum to something called maybe a hybrid. You put it this way. So, but bulk of it will remain in the gray zone. So, Indian realities. What are the Indian realities? Land, we are facing unrestricted domains. All domains are against us. Sea, the threats are increasing. Cyber attacks, I shall cover how much we are facing now. Possibilities of attacks in space cannot be ruled out now, with China now gaining the hypersonic capability, ASAT capability. There are technologies like satellite dazzling, which will prevent your satellites from not functioning, or they get disturbed from their orbit. Debris can be manipulated. Similarly, you have terrorism. India is in constant danger of this form of gray zone activity. Economic interventions. HDFC investments were being undertaken by the Chinese, which luckily the Indian government was able to check in time. There are similar efforts being made to take control of your financial establishments. Nuclear dynamics will continue to play an important role. All of you are aware the SIFRI figures of the latest SIFRI figure. They are intending to reach to a level of 1,500 nuclear weapons by 2035. India still remains at its declared, I won't say declared, but as assessed at the levels which is now lower than Pakistan as well. So nuclear dynamics will also continue to be, played upon to affect your mind or affect the mind of our strategic thinker, military planner, etc. You will have to think over it. Today it is 500 now. If tomorrow by 2030 it becomes 1,000, what do you do? Do we still remain in the same policy domain? Do we still remain with the same doctrine? These are things which we'll have to think and debate over. Dilemma of balancer or alliance or significant power approach. We are not strong enough to be straight away adopting a posture of strategic autonomy on everything. There may be instances where we may not be able to take that particular stand. So we'll continue to face through various international manipulations. Where should we go? Till now, we have adopted that posture of neutrality against the Russia-Ukraine war and in the Israel-Hamas war. How long can we continue with this unless we build a muscle part which will give you that kind of a flex to adopt such a policy. And therefore, in my view, in the coming years, defense preparedness, national security has to be given a very, very high priority. And that is why I have underlined it by saying we are sufferers rather than prosecutors. Should we or should we not change our approach to build a more muscular, more strong, robust national security policy, which gives us that punch? Budget constraints will always be there. How do we achieve it? That is a different matter. Optimization, there are so many techniques, optimization, integration, theaterization. Howsoever we achieve, but national security has to be given prominence in the coming few years as far as we are concerned. Some examples quickly, I've already spoken about it, so I will not dwell much on it. Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas, Iran, Syrian war, even the ISIS was involved here. Iran, Saudi Arabia, Houthi rebels, US against Russia. In fact, US against Russia and Russia against US. It is a two-way process, and it is very interesting to read what they do to each other. China, Taiwan, it's an ongoing. The world's most affected victim of greyzone warfare is Taiwan. I can share figures with you. I'm not included it here. They are the worst of it. The Chinese have literally got the Taiwanese under their full spectrum greyzone warfare. It doesn't look like that because that country keeps on defending itself. If you talk in terms of India, China's new border law. So clear. I'll leave this slide. I'll not quote much on this because we are running short of time. But suffice it to say that China is adopting the same approach against India now. Whether it is renaming of places, whether it is changing of maps, or whether it is inciting your neighbors to publish a map on their currency note. I'm talking of the Nepal incident very recently. These are not incidents to be ignored. These are cases being built over a period of time for them to justify any action which they take against us, which may be in the national security, in the closer to the conventional domain. And that is why I said our national security has to be now given priority number one if we have to survive in the current environment. What is happening to us? Concerns. It's a formalized transaction. Border laws. Creating border villages. There are instances where the border villages were very small. Now they become very big. If you look at the satellite images, their size and strength has grown up. What can they do? They can conceal troops, they can conceal weapon systems, and straight away get into off the block for at least limited objective, limited wars. So we have to be careful of these developments which are taking place. So what is the way forward? Why can't we do it? Mansarovar was always an Indian place. I mean, in terms of it was more frequented by the Indians than by the others. But we don't know. So therefore, I think a counter grey zone has to start out. Zorawar went right up to Kailash. I can quote 100. I've just tried finishing an article, me and Jan Chaturvedi, finishing an article where we are giving the linkages of India with Tibet. There are far too many linkages. We just have to revive them. Just have to blow them up. We have been keeping quiet because of the Tibet people of Tibet. But if we are going to get affected like this, I think it is high time we also start doing something of a similar nature. Otherwise, we will be ultimately again swamped by their grey zone activities. Come to cyber, last major activity which they are doing against us. Global figure, 130% increase in ransomware attacks. Likely losses in by 2025 is going to be 10.5 billion. Indian figures, ransom attack in 2022, 3,950 attacks, 22 billion record, and 150 million was paid as ransom. You and me don't even come to know. Companies don't tell you as to how much Airtel has paid to a group of hackers just to ensure that the message doesn't go into the public and you don't get upset that my personal data and all has been hacked. Where do you get all those calls? Please take loan, please do this. These are all coming through ransomware attack. The data is being actually, they are buying back your data. As simple as that. 2023 ransom attacks have seen a different trend now. Zomato aa gaya hai abhi ransom. Zomato, Swiggy. By that I don't mean that the Zomato is doing it. I'm saying companies have now come up. Earlier there used to be individual hackers who were doing this ransom attack. Now there are companies established to do the ransom attack, and they're calling them as ransomware as service. We are service provider to do ransom attacks. So you hire company X. I mean, one of the companies is Phoenix Ransomware. It targets what all it targets? Manufacturing, retail, agriculture, media, and healthcare. बचा क्या है आपके? Lockbit, as a company, it has targeted Windows and Apple both. So your both systems collapsed. So look at the kind of things which people are evolving, and bitcoins are one of the major factors of this kind of an activity because they take the payments in bitcoins. Cyber attacks, I've already quoted about India specific ones. February 22, JNPCT, Jawaharlal Nehru Port terminals. May 22, SpiceJet. July 22, Water Resources Department, Goa. October 22, Tata Power. AIMS in November 22. I have many others. Energy site has been hacked. Most number of government sites have been hacked. You and me actually are not aware because these are not publicly shared. But this is something which we have to be careful of. Average 761 threats every minute by India. Every minute there are 761 attacks taking place in India. The Bombay Stock Exchange, please go and have a look. If any one of you gets an opportunity, go to Bombay Stock Exchange and see their counter cyber workforce. One full floor of the CGO complex is full of it. Two such floors are full of people actually fighting the cyber attacks which are going on your NSC and PSC. This was done by a military officer, first national cyber security coordinator who went to BSc and he said, "Kam se kam ye to kar lo." Because the diktat of the government is that every business house will create a cyber force to defend themselves against cyber attack. Unfortunately, this is not happening. It is high time that we look at it seriously, give diktat to various business houses. Otherwise, you and me will suffer subsequently, whether they are financial institutions, whether they are innovations, any kind of data heavy activity is subject to this kind of interference. And it's not that if it is not happening now, it will not happen later. I gave you the example right in the beginning that they have done technology demonstrations on your systems. Some other examples are China has actually spent in year 2020 $6 billion, 2018, $6 billion to buy good press in foreign countries, which includes America, to publish articles against a country, against somebody who's proving to be a competition to China. It's not that the US will not do it equally. Sometimes we blame the US that New York Times has published this against India. Sorry, if the Chinese who have now got the stakes in New York Times, who are now insisting that you publish an article against India? Where is the New York office? In India. They are giving freebies. Come to China to the journalists. Come to China, make them stay in 5-star, 7-star hotels, buy them out, and send them back. These are documented open source information. Nothing which I'm saying is classified. Influence bid to control financial institutions. I've already said. Influence public mind through social media, TikTok. That's why we had to ban TikTok. America has still not been able to do it. Dokala, Eastern Ladakh, Yangtze, Nakula, so on are also examples of grey zone war. The Western Theatre Commander, once I happened to meet him in a person-to-person meeting on one of their visits to India, and he says we are upset with your media for hyping up the border issues like any border altercation. That time Doklam had not happened, and 6 months later, 4 months later, Doklam happened, and he was Western Theatre Commander. So, disinformation campaign through social media, statements of park leaders are example. Also, payment to journalists to publish anti-India articles. These are very common things. There are non-state and state actors, both who are indulging in this kind of an activity. If you do the research, you'll find them well on the earth. Finally, time has come to make Krishna's choice, and which was in Mahabharata. He had to resort to what? Aswathama mara gaya. Narona Hato. That Narona Hato was also introduced because of Yudhishthir, otherwise he wouldn't have used that also. Similarly, he used the same tactics for Karna. But there are a number of examples of Mahabharata. That's why Mahabharata is considered as a war which justified unfair means for a just cause. Are we prepared and way ahead for India? This is the NDO. This is called NDO. I will not go into each factor because I have already elaborated on them. Just to say that the scope of war has gone so vast because of grey zone that the lines between military and civil are no more existing, and war is no more a preserve of the military. You, me, and everybody is involved in the war, both for fighting and for countering it. And finally, interdependence. If I'm doing something in the energy sector, it will have impact on the economy. If I'm doing something in the economy sector, it will have an impact on the well-being of the people. Therefore, it can not be a single agency or a sectionized effort to counter grey zone. It has to be a whole of nation. That's the long and short of it. And it will have both hard and the soft power elements to counter it. Right? You will face this kind of war from both actors, state actors and non-state actors. I hope I'm not disturbed. What should be the concept? It should be cost effective. So is it going? It has to be cost effective. It should combine capabilities in all domains to cater for adversarial actions in the economy, military, diplomatic, information. Need for a sound network cutting across domains. This is something which we need to concentrate on. Brigadier Nikhil, he needs to take account of it. You're part of the ideas. This is one area. Unless we have a robust network, we are unlikely to actually achieve success in grey zone warfare. Aim would always be to shorten the OODA loop while reacting to grey zone threats. So for that, networks are important. Need for cyber and digital force separate. But Prime Minister announced it long time back, National Cyber Force. I think it is required. We can no more deal with it in bits and pieces. Need for a separate policy, structure, and domains to fight communication to fight as a team as far as grey zone is concerned. This is a broad outline of the concept, but if I were to put it in a even more simplistic term, what are we looking at geopolitically? Xi Jinping, a bureaucratic dictator. That's the way he puts party party policy behind his dictatorship, right? And then declining US, which is not able to influence the right kind of pressure on the Chinese activities. And in this, we have the geopolitical environment, which is VUCA, which lends itself to fighting wars both in contact and non-contact domain, especially in limited contact and full-scale grazing warfare. If not full spectrum, but limited contact war and full spectrum grazing war. Technology is helping all these to take place. So the broad levers of our future gray zone strategy should be a whole of nation approach, leverage technology, create HR techno leader. No more the CEOs can afford to be, मुझे तो पता ही नहीं, I don't know how does the computer work or how does communication work. If there is some fault in a system, he has to be smart enough to do it. There is a good proposal which has been created by Lt Gen Subrata Saha on techno leader. I think it's high time we pick this up and start implementing it for our defense forces. And finally, we must have a doctrine now, separate doctrine for grazing warfare. The Americans have made a doctrine for proxy war. We are facing so much of threat that we really don't have this very sound whole of nation doctrine. I'm not talking about only the military. It has to be a whole of nation, a centralized doctrine coming out. So, should we indulge in the new ways of war fighting? It cannot be laid down as an official policy because there are certain things, like I said, certain activities which cannot be openly told. The Chinese do. They hired think tanks to create a document which is called the three warfare strategy. It's not part of their policy, but their activities are similar. They're following that. Maybe we could think of that. Our policy formulation, I feel Cotelia's approach could become the basis of our gray zone or for that matter, full spectrum warfare strategy. Whole of nation goes without saying under the PA. I'm not even putting it under any other ministry. There was a talk of putting it as a separate ministry. I feel it has to be under the PA. So this is something which is the future of warfare, and if we don't deal with it with a very strong centralized force, national level coordination will be there. And this is one area which should be made apolitical, irrespective of state government, which party, which gray zone has to be now made apolitical, a centralized structure which should, something. What do I mean by apolitical? Election Commission is an apolitical body which has a writ all across. If the Election Commission wants, it can remove person A, person B. So similar kind of a structure, let the Parliament discuss it and create a structure to fight. In fact, for that matter, entire security aspect has to be independent, agnostic of the kind of people who are in power. Then only you can actually have any move. Otherwise, everything will be suspect. Why doesn't the NAT grid go off? Takes off. Why? Because there is this thing that will be used against political leadership, etc. So that kind of a movement has to come. That kind of internal, feeling has to come from inside you, inside the public debate. Create such a structure. Look at our, spectrum of intelligence agencies, both military and non-military. How do you coordinate them? If this fellow is there and the ideas, he would know about it. We are doing something about it. I'm not saying that we're not doing something about it. Created nodes, node A, node B, etc. We've tried to streamline these things, but it is still a suboptimal structure. And that is why I have summed up my major recommendation: apex leadership at PMO level, then role of information policy direction, then creation of tri-service social media organization. High time. Why should each service have its own separate social platform network? It can have separate social platform network. Along with that, there is a need for a defense-wide social media platform network. What is CDS? CDS should become the driver of this particular social media network. An upgraded ADGPI is what I'm telling. Develop strong architecture for content sharing and two-way process. Currently, all our social media networks are one-way process. We give, people have to take, not take, doesn't make it sense. It has to become a two-way process. Let others be also feeding into this. You can develop a filter that suppose I have posted something on ADGPI as a message. You put a filter and then let it pass on. But at least it become two-way, a feedback loop. You will find it will become much more stronger mechanism. And of course, gray zone framework for tracking and monitoring the campaign outcome. This is basically what I'm saying is feedback. Gray zone operation, developing responses in gray zone must be made more robust within the existing mechanisms. Here, I am basically referring to don't do changes in the existing organization. 5D is there, let it be. RAW is there, let it be. DGMI is there, let it be. But their activity levels have to be coordinated and made robust. Policy wise, they have to be given that leeway. To target gray zone, the way we are facing it, we should give it back in a similar manner. More than that, I will not like to cover. The rest I'll stop here. I think I have overshot my time, but I thought I must cover this. Whole of a nation strategy can no longer be a rhetoric. Information, social media, cyber warfare, and niche technologies are the decisive factors in the current and future conflicts. Matching strategies are essential to make response in hybrid and gray zone comprehensive and relevant. This is the sum nichode of my talk. Information, social media, cyber, and niche technologies. They are the areas which we need to focus on. Matching strategies are required. We can no longer be seen to be silent. A response has to be there. Of course, it should be deniable, non-attributable. All those factors of gray zone have to be taken into account. The four elements of gray zone, and conclude with this, is deniability must be there in our activities. Non-attributability must be there. That means it should not get traced back to you. The third aspect is it should be slow and prolonged. It cannot be a sudden activity, right? Slow death. Remember, I told that. And fourth is that it must finally lead to achieving your objective. Just doing gray zone activity for the sake of doing, no. It should have an aim. If we are going and indulging in something, it should be with a strategic or a political aim to carry out that. It need not be always counter. It could be a proactive in a different area, in a different domain, in a multiple domain. Thank you. And finally, I close with this. Time has come to make Krishna's choice, made in Mahabharata. For just cause, all means are fair. Thank you.